Thank you very much for this opportunity to talk to you today about a subject I think is very important and one that I have tried to help with many of the papers that I have been asked to look at. So the title today is Writing an Extended Abstract and Title. And I have divided this talk up into 5 sections. The first section, I'll look at what role does the abstract, why is the abstract so important? I think it's very vital that the students understand what the function of an abstract is. Then, in the second section, I'll look at introduction, how to write an introduction. This is the section that is most important. Often, the papers I get to look at, they either jump straight to the details without any background or context, or they are a mini literature review. In fact, an introduction needs to be somewhere in between. And today I'd like to try and emphasize that. Then, after that, we'll take a break and do an exercise where we look at a presentation of some research that has been jumbled and try to get you to think about how that presentation would be structured. Then, after that exercise, I go on quickly to look at the methods and results section, as well as the discussion. And finally, I'd like to give you some tips on how to write an extended abstract, as well as write a title. Okay. So let's start. Why is an abstract so important? When I think of what the reason is, I think of Maslow's hierarchy of needs, where a certain basic needs need to be met before you can go on to the next level. The example I like to think of is food. When you are very hungry and you don't know what you're going to eat today, any small apple with not very doesn't look very good, but as long as you get some food, your stomach is happy. The calories is the most important point. But once you've eaten and have enough calories for most of the time, then your stomach is happy. Now your tongue and your eyes need to be satisfied. There you need to look at, is it a nice big red apple? Does it taste juicy, crunchy? Is it sweet? And so on. And so with a research, I think you can look at it in exactly the same way. In earlier times, when there were not so many researchers, then it was just important to have original, innovative research. But nowadays, in this global society, where you are competing with so many other people for messages, getting that message, now just having original, innovative research isn't enough. It is a minimum hurdle. Once you've got that minimum content of originality and innovation, now you have to market your research. Make it so that other people want to read and understand what you have done. And that practice is very important at this time. Okay. And so as I've said here, the abstract is in fact your key to being discovered. Okay. So in this very busy era where there is lots of information, in fact information overload, everybody is looking to select what they're going to read. And so if you do not have a nice entrance to your research, and your entrance is your abstract and your title, then you are not going to get anybody to select and read your paper. So that is a very important skill. Also, in this era of the computer age, a lot of people are using databases to try and find research. And that research and the databases are based on indexing of the keywords. The keywords most often in your abstract and title. So if your title and your abstract don't contain those keywords that are going to help somebody find your research, then you're not going to even get them to have a look at what your research is about. And then if your abstract isn't well written, then it's likely just to be avoided, not read anymore. So it's an extremely important process for you as engineers and scientists and as global leaders, communicators, that you need to understand that importance of being discovered. And one thing I'd like to mention, though, is that it isn't a skill that is genetically acquired. So it's a skill you can learn, but it's a skill that requires effort. It requires practice. A quote I like to use is of a professor. He said, if you want a 10-minute summary, I can have it for you a week from today. So it's going to take me a week to think about how I'm going to choose just the vital information to give for that 10-minute lecture. If you want it for 30 minutes, I can do it tomorrow. So I don't have to think so much. I just put more information there. And so what I pick is not so important. If you want a whole hour, I'm ready now. So I can do it, talk to you now. That is how difficult it is to write an abstract, because what you're doing is just picking out the essence, the extremely important part, not just talking off the top of your head. So what is an abstract? An abstract is a short, self-contained, meaning you don't have to refer to anything else. All the necessary information is inside that abstract. And it is a powerful statement describing a larger work. So it is the gateway to that research. And as I've mentioned also, it is a marketing tool. Okay. So typically, an abstract is divided into 4 sections. 1, the background, or setting the context, methods, results, and discussion and conclusion. So you can think of it as a hourglass. So in olden times, when they were trying to measure time, they put a sand in the glass, turn it upside down, and it would go through. But it was very narrow at the middle here. Okay. So in your talk, or in your abstract, what you're trying to do is at the very start is set the context. Why is this research being done? Why is it important that this research was done? And highlighting what is the problem, current problem that the research is trying to address. And so it goes from this broad, general topic down to the specifics of what that particular research paper is about. Then, in the hypothesis or the method, this sets the whole tone for the paper. It tells what is the specific focus for this particular paper, what are they trying to find, and what was done and how. Then when you get to the results, you want to tell the audience what they found, but not just figures. You want to set out, we found that this was unexpected, or this was much larger than was previously expected to be. And usually this is the longest section of the paper. And it also gives the necessary details about how those results fit in a larger context. And finally, you allow yourself to discuss what do these results mean? Often I get papers where they have, they write the details, the numbers, the results as figures. It means a lot to those people who have written that paper. But if you don't tell the reader or the audience what that means, it is open to many different interpretations. And so you need to be able to, in the discussion and conclusion, tell the reader what you think these results mean, not just what the results are. If it is X, for many readers, X is just a number. But if you tell them what that X means in terms of the context, then when they have finished listening to you or reading your paper, they will understand what your interpretation of the results were, not what their own interpretation is. So if we want to look at the introduction, I like to use this funnel here with lots of information up the top here. And so what you're trying to do at the start is introduce a context to the research that most people will understand. And then from there, you gradually filter what is the problem of all of this, what is the question being asked by that research, or how is it going to solve that problem, and out comes here, this is the one we choose. And what is being pointed out in this whole process is we chose this one, and the logic for choosing this one is very well thought out, and it is an important area of research that needs to be done. And that is where the audience or the readers need to understand. If you just say, we're doing this, without any of this introduction, and jump straight to what your research is, many people will be left wondering, why did they do this research? Is it really important? Or is it just something they did for something to make, fill out the time? Here you really want to emphasize why we chose this is for extremely important reason, and that reason means that when the reader gets to here, they understand it and they want to read on. If you just jump to here and confuse the reader, then many readers will just leave the paper, will not continue on reading. So some common points for introduction. It sets the context of the research. Why is it important? What is being done? What is the problem? Sets the scope of this is what we are going to look at. This is only one part of the whole issue, but this is the one we are focusing on this paper. And it looks at what are the objectives. It predicts what they thought they were going to find at the start of the research. Now, what I'd like to do is to take a break and do an exercise of looking at a piece of research that was used to give to a general audience. And what I have done is I've jumbled up the paragraphs of this research abstract, so that I want you as pairs or as threes to try and unjumble, work out what is the correct order for the paragraphs. The aim of this exercise is not just for you to find out what is the correct order, but to explain to your partner why you think this is the first paragraph, why do you think this is the second paragraph. Try and get each of you to use your own thinking and your own voice to start to express why they are structured this presentation in this way. Okay. So Professor Yen, could you also please coordinate with the pairing or freeze into you, and I'll do the same here in Kyoto.
Yeah, okay, yeah. I think all the students has already had the manuscript.
Okay. I'll hand that here. Could you divide up? So one for two of these, one for two of those, and another three. Okay, so Stephen, could you and another son and Harrison, could you lift up with three people over here? And could you move that to? And maybe a group of four here. Yeah. Before you start to read, I need to maybe just explain a little detail. This research is about sclerotinia, and one of the reasons I chose it was that when I was a researcher in New Zealand, I was working on physiology of kiwi fruit, but I was also at the same time helping a researcher who was studying fungus and sclerotinia, and so I spent many hours in the orchard looking for this small mushroom, or helping the other researchers look for this small mushroom. And what is important about sclerotinia is it is a very damaging fungus that in the early spring, this fungus here, this mushroom, grows and it sends out spores. And these spores then infect the flowers and the fruit and cause a lot of damage. And then in the autumn, it produces sclerotia. Sclerotia are very hard, small things that drop into the ground, and they are asleep during the winter. And then in the spring again, they come back up. And so this research is looking at sclerotia and the importance of sclerotia. Okay. So could you now start to read that, and as pairs or as threes, start to explain to each other why you think this should be paragraph 1, why you should think this should be paragraph 2. Okay. is the first paragraph. Maybe 3. Why do you think 3? Okay. Okay. So, if you heard the word sclerotinia for the first time, would you understand what sclerotinia is? So maybe it is also important to first emphasize what is the problem, what is the big problem, and what role does sclerotinia play in that problem. Oh, yeah. Okay. How about you? Which one do you think is the first paragraph? Okay. So you like the detail. Jump straight to the detail. Are there any other paragraphs that sort of give more general context? Don't know? Okay.
This one I read from 2.
Okay, so today your role is the interviewer. Why do you think this? Why are you extract?
I was the same.
Why do you think so? He's saying paragraph 2. 3. This paragraph. Explain.
Sclerotinia.
Same to he's changed. But you see, as you said before, this talks about the problem. You see that the problem is sclerotinia is bringing. So, which one between 2 and 3? Which one does how fast? 2.
The second paragraph. I will have to explain again.
Okay. 2. Then which one after 2? I think if you go with 2, yeah, I think it should be because just think of what is the next paragraph there. We decide to.
You still think 3? Well, 5. Okay. Professor Yen.
Hello, yes.
Yes. A number of the groups here have chosen either paragraph 2 or paragraph 3. What in Taiwan do the groups in Taiwan think is the first paragraph?
Yes. Paragraph 2 and 3. Yes.
2 or 3, okay. Okay, so if we look at paragraph 3, it says sclerotinia is found all over the world. Okay, and so from that very first sentence, it is using a very complex word, sclerotinia. So in many contexts, it's jumping to a very specific detail. So I think even that first word there is suggesting that it is not the very start of the presentation, but partway into it. Okay? So if you look at 2, put really bluntly, we need to be much smarter about the way we produce food. So it's very general. If you remember that hourglass of starting off at the broad context and then starting to come in. So it's starting at a context of food production, and looking at defining the context for the research. So in fact, the first paragraph is 2, and then in the second one is 3. It is then saying, okay, food loss is extremely important, and loss from fungus is one of the most important losses, and of those, fungus sclerotinia is one very important part of that food loss. Okay, so now what I'd like you to do is start to look at paragraph 3 and paragraph 4. What is the next one after these first 2? Number 3 and number 4. What is okay, so this is the first paragraph is 2, the second paragraph is 3, the third paragraph is, what is the number for third paragraph? Okay, 5, yeah? And 5? Why do you think 5?
Paragraph 5 is explain also sclerotinia. So leader wants what? Sclerotinia is next to paragraph 3. So I think paragraph 5 is the next paragraph 3.
Okay, okay, good. Do you agree? Okay. And how about you? What do you think is the third paragraph? 5. Why do you think 5?
In South Carolina,
Mhm. Yeah.
then it worked general area. Why also should
What is the problem?
Okay. Do you agree? And what do you think is number 4th paragraph? This one here. Yes. One. Okay. Why do you think one? Okay. And what has this group decided is the 3rd paragraph? Oh, he's gone and finished. Why do you think 4? No voice. No voice. So. Why do you think 4?
This part is more general.
More general.
And this is more specific.
More specific.
Start explaining this part.
Professor Yang, could you ask one of your pairs to explain why they chose, what they chose for the 3rd paragraph and why?
So the 3rd paragraph, which number? 5? Oh, you choose 5.
考えてきたときに出てきた文章なんか読んでたけどじゃあ
Give the background and the definition of the problem.
その後なんで一番いい
Okay, I'll go on then to the 3rd paragraph is in fact 5. So in the first one, they've looked at why food loss is so important and fungus. Then in the second one, they've identified one of the most important funguses, Sclerotinia. And now in this 3rd one, they want to show why Sclerotinia is so important, showing how much damage it makes. Okay? And the 4th one is number 4. Okay, so the logic of what they're doing is, first at the very basic context, reducing food loss is critical. Not just making more, but reducing food loss. And Sclerotinia is an important source of loss, is the second one. Okay? So we have to look at food loss, and food loss, when we think about food loss, Sclerotinia is an extremely important one to think about. Then in the 3rd one, of the sclerotinia cycle, the sclerotia are extremely tough. They are very hard to kill or to control. And so, and the fourth one is the fungicides don't target sclerotia. So an extremely important problem that we need to conquer is how can we control sclerotia, because that is the most difficult stage to control in the whole life cycle, and this sclerotia is having very important economic consequences for food loss, and food loss is also very critical for the world's future food production and reduction of hunger in the food world. So now, by looking at that logic, you understand why they are going to focus on sclerotia and why it is important to do so. But if they had just said, we now look at sclerotia and do this research, then very few people would understand why it is so important to do that research. So setting that context. Now I'd like to just go on. So the aim of this exercise wasn't for you to guess correctly the whole 7 things, but to get you to think about how they set out the introduction so that it leads all the readers to understand why they're doing what they're doing. So, usually for most scientists, writing the method section is the easiest section. It's maybe more straightforward, but it also has a very important role that you need to understand. That in the scientific community, you are adding to a community of knowledge, and that adding to that knowledge, scientists by training or engineers by training are going to be critical. They are not just going to accept whatever you say. You have to convince them that what you have done is credible, it is something that can be trusted, and if they want to, they can go and repeat that and test it for themselves, and it also enables them to evaluate. Did they do the right research? Did they measure the right things? And so this section is critical and needs to be written in a way that serves these 3 purposes of repeatability, credibility, and enabling evaluation. Okay. So in this next one, where we've looked at the first 4 of the introduction, in fact, what happens for the next one is how are they going to do this research? And so it is paragraph number 6, and it says, so my project is focused on identifying which genes are essentials. Okay, so it is going to the methods. Now they are going to say, this is what we're going to look at. We're going to look at the genes of the sclerotinia. Okay, and so what they do is we're going to identify and disrupt sclerotia genes for the next 2 paragraphs. Then in the results section, you need to answer critical questions about what do the results say and what do these results mean in their context. So we found X, most researchers have found Y. There's a problem. We need to find out why the differences are. Or we found X and many other researchers have found X, so the methodology that we have used is credible or can it be trusted. So you're not just saying we found X, but trying to explain what that X means. And then finally, when you go to the discussion and conclusions, you look at, goes to 1. And in this case, it looks at, this paragraph looks at how do they go about actually doing it. They silence the melamine production. And they explain why they silence that melamine production. Finally, I'd like to go now on to reporting and discussion. Okay. Often, the discussion section that I get to read is more a report than a discussion. And I'd like to emphasize the difference between the two. A report just says this was what was found and just describes the values found for the results. It doesn't give you any context, it doesn't give you any understanding of what those results mean. You, the researcher, or you, the person who's writing the abstract, are the one who is most knowledgeable about what those results mean. And you need to convey that information to the reader. Okay? So you need to show the relationships between what you measured and other phenomena. You need to give them what is these results. Are they extremely important or just what other people have found? Give them a sense of how to evaluate those results. And from those, because we found X, we think that in the future we can develop a product to control sclerotia by doing this, from this result. So you're able to extend your results out into the future and predict what is some of the next steps to do in that research. And so, often in the discussion, it follows an order where at the start of the discussion, you revisit. This is what we hypothesized, this is what we thought was the problem or how we could solve the problem, this is how we went about trying to solve it. And then, what we actually found, this is the most important result. Most researchers will have a large amount of data and results that they could use. But if you just present lots of data and results, then you have the potential to confuse the reader. You need to help the reader to interpret the results. This is what was most important about what we found. And that if you don't remember anything else, this is the result that we think you should remember when you finish reading this paper. Okay. And it helped to explain or interpret the results and the implications for future research. And so, in the final one, they looked at was paragraph number 7, and they looked at food loss prevention through control of sclerotinia. Okay. So first they showed you food loss is important, sclerotinia has very important economic consequences for food loss, sclerotia is one of the most toughest parts of that cycle, and then we looked at the genes, how can we control those, and so in the future I think, or we think, we can develop a method to reduce food loss by controlling sclerotia of the sclerotinia life cycle. It follows a very logical consequence step further. Okay. Next, I'd like to go to look at some tips for writing an abstract. Again, in most contexts, an abstract is very short. It needs to be brief, but it needs also to be very precise about what was done, and it needs to be, as I said earlier, standalone. You cannot say, please look at the results section, or we discuss in the paper this or that. It needs to be able to be read and fully understood by itself. Because, as I said at the start, an abstract is your gateway for the people to discover your research. And when an editor or a reviewer or a potential reader are thinking about reading your paper, they are first going to look at the title and the abstract. And it's there that they're going to decide, nah, I don't want to waste my time. Or, oh, this looks interesting. I'll spend some of my valuable time trying to understand what this research is about. So it's extremely important. Okay. Also in the abstract, you don't want to add any new information that wasn't in the paper. That is not the place to put that information. And you need to keep your sentences short and simple. Science these days is an international, globalized effort. And there are maybe many more non-native English speakers than English speakers. And so it is not a contest to show how good your grammar or how long or complex your sentences can be. It is a quest to try and convey as simply and as easily the information and the knowledge that you have gained from that research to others. And that can be done the best by using simple sentences rather than complex ones. It's not needed. And as well, if at all possible, try and reduce or minimize the amount of jargon or abbreviation that you use in that paper. Because oftentimes it will be researchers who are not in exactly the same field as you, but who are maybe interested in using your results in their own research. But if you use these unfamiliar jargon or acronyms, abbreviations, then you're in danger of confusing or getting them to reject the paper because they can't understand it. And as I said also in the beginning, to have your paper discovered, the most common way of doing that nowadays is through databases. And those databases and the search engine that used for that database is based on keywords coming from your title and from your abstract. And so if your abstract contains those keywords many times, then that paper, when people put those keywords in, will come up the top of the list, not down the bottom of the list. So you want to make sure that when people search for your research, you have used keywords that they will be using, and that when they do that in that search, your paper will come up towards the top of the list rather than hidden down at 2,552. Now, I'd like to just briefly, while I've got your time, just to also emphasize exactly the same thing applies to the title. Often, I get the impression that many people will write and do the research, sweat and pour blood and tears for many months doing their research. And then it's a big sigh of, I've done it. Oh, I've got to send it out. I have to write a title. And then write a title very quickly and try and send it off. But in fact, that title is going to be one of the most important sources for you to market your research. So you need to have in that title what the research is about, what techniques were used, what is studied, what were the findings. And so you need to try and answer those questions and then identify or list 6 or 10 keywords from these answers. Then look at the keywords and try and look at, this is the highest priority, so this should come up the front of the sentence. This is maybe less priority at the back of the sentence. Start to combine those words in many different forms to start to evaluate what is the best way I can write a title that captures as many keywords and has the priority of what I think is the most important parts of that research in that title, because that is where the search engine is going to find those keywords. So write out as many sentences as possible, and then start to select, oh, this sentence looks better than this one. And then slowly start to mold that title so that you delete all unnecessary words or non-essential information, reread and edit, so that in the end you come up with a title that doesn't have to be grammatically correct. Most titles nowadays do not follow a sentence structure. There is very little is or was or da 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 da. It is only those key words as in a noun phrase describing what the research is. There's my references. So, thank you very much for listening. Are there any questions?
Any questions?
It can mean one of two things. Either you're very confused, or it was explained well. I presume the latter. Are there any questions in NTU?
Hi. Any questions? You should have many questions because you are going to submit your own abstract next week. So, yeah, please, Amelia.
We have a question. About the title, are we going to write a new title from the article or use the same?
I would suggest that you write a new title.
Oh, okay.
But
Thank you.
one of the reasons why I do suggest that is that often the paper will be quite complex and contain a lot of information. And as a process of giving a presentation, one of the things you may have done is not to try and report all what was found, but pick out some important parts that you think the paper is most emphasized on. And so your title should reflect what parts you picked out rather than report what the whole paper was about.
Sheila, do you have any questions? Sheila, do you hear me?
Okay, so Professor Piller, may I ask a question about the result part? As you say, the result part is the longest distribution in one article, but in the structure, but as you mentioned in the structure, it has the narrowest part compared to the big problem and the discussion. So how can we adjust the range of the result in our the whole introduction?
Okay, thank you very much for the question. Yes. So, in an abstract, usually the introduction maybe is 10% or 20% of the whole abstract, whereas the results will be 40 or 50% of the whole abstract. When I was looking at the hourglass, the broad context is not how many words is there, but the idea or the concept. Okay? And so as you go from this broad concept of the example I used was food loss, is that broad context. And then they narrowed it down to the sclerotia. So it's not just sclerotinia, but one part of that cycle of that sclerotia, and how can we control that sclerotia. So that is a very fine or narrow, detailed part of what that particular research is about. The research is in that context of that broad food loss, but the actual research and, for instance, the results talking about what that what they found in terms of that sclerotia can be many words long or quite long in length, but it's the focus of it is very narrow.
Thank you. And one more question. Is there any limitation of the words of the title? As many, how many words in the top or at the list?
Again, like the abstract, a concise, simple title is the most desirable one. So if you can keep it to 8 to 10 words, that is great. If it gets any longer, then you start to lose some of the impact that that title may have. Oh, we have one question here in Kyoto.
Just same question on the title.
Mm-hmm.
I'd like to know how to write a good title, because most of the time when writing a title, you focus on the methodology used and the result, and is it okay if you write a title and paraphrase it without need of including some technical terms of the methodology you use? And when is the best time to write a title? Before you start, during, or just like you say, maybe after you finish?
I think the best time to write a title is at the very end. Reason being is that during that process of writing it, initially you don't write, most people do not write in the introduction, methods, materials, results, discussion order. Most people will first start with the results. They have more than enough results to fill many papers. And so you have to, in one particular paper, say, I'm going to focus on this particular subject or this topic. What results of mine best talk about that topic, best help the reader to understand that topic? And then use those results to tell that story. Then when you've got those results, then you know, okay, I need to tell the people what materials and methods I used to get those results, not all of my results. And then once you've got the results, materials and methods, you've already set out what the story is going to be. Then in your introduction, you can come back and start to say, why is this story important? So your introduction should be written towards the end of that writing process, because now what you're trying to do is highlight why the research that you chose, or the results that you chose, why that story is so important, and why the reader should be interested, should spend the time to delve into the details of the research. Initially, most readers will look at the title and abstract and will be thinking, am I going to use my time to read this? I don't want to waste my time. Most people do not read a journal from page 1 to page 99, but pick out only ones that they think are going to be of value to them. And so that choosing of that title is also like that professor when he was thinking about giving a presentation. If he had to give a 10-minute presentation, it's going to take more than a week to think about what is the most important thing I want to talk about in that 10 minutes. And in 10 minutes, you can only talk about a certain amount of information. You have to limit it. You know, this professor has mountains of information and knowledge he wants to tell. In that particular thing, he has to think very carefully. And your title is exactly the same. Your whole paper has lots of information, lots of details, but that short title is going to be the decision point for many readers as to whether they will spend any more time looking at or reading further. So I understand the emotions. Yeah? When I look at researchers, many of them, their research is their baby. They've given many long hours of love and attention to this whole research. And when they come to write a paper or give a presentation, it's their baby. They don't want to throw everything away, and they want to put everything in there. But that defeats the purpose, because in that instance where you try and give the whole baby, you are potentially losing your audience.
One question from Kyoto University.
Thank you, Professor, for your general but important topic. My question is, I have observed in previous time some reviewer emphasis to put more number of reference in the reference list. So my question is, which was important, to put the update reference or number of reference in writing paper?
Often, the introduction, the mistake often made in the introduction is to treat it like a mini review, have lots of references. There is a temptation then, in that stage, is to show how much information you have acquired, how full your knowledge of the subject area is. By doing that, though, you are going to lose a lot of readers, because they are choosing this paper, or potentially going to choose your paper, not as a review, but for what its research is about. And so that introduction should be more focused on why your research is important, and why you chose to do it in the way that you chose to do it, rather than trying to promote more your general understanding of the whole data area. Where maybe results references are more important is in terms of the results section, of putting it in context. We found X, other researchers have found Y, or they also found X, and that helps to the reader to understand what those results mean. And so in that section there'd be more judicious use of references than maybe in the introduction or in the discussion. Because in the discussion, you really wanted to expand out the what the potential implications are, and you can use references to indicate where that expansion of the research can occur. So the answer, in short, is a yes and no.
Okay, thank you. I have another query. That is not often, but very few times. I saw some paper in food safety. There are no separate methodology, but they combine the methodology and results like that. So, what do you think about this matter?
Okay. The first criteria when you are starting to prepare a paper for a journal or a conference is find out what that journal wants. There is no use arguing with the journal or the conference. This should be the style that I want to write. You are trying to market your tool in their journal. You need to follow their prescribed style. So if an abstract is only 200 words long, you write an abstract that is only 200 words long. Also, in this era of the internet age, the style of the presentation is starting to change. Now, for instance, in some of the open access journals, the materials and methods section is at the very end. And so for most people, when they start to read a paper, it'll first be the title or the abstract to decide whether they're going to spend any more time. If they think that it's okay, maybe go to the results section and maybe to the discussion section or the last sentence in the discussion section. And then for those who are extremely interested, finally they may go to the materials and methods section. Yeah? So when we were in the paper journal era, there was always the IMRAD structure, introduction, materials, methods, results, discussion. Now, a number of the open access journals have introduction, results, discussion. They also have author's summary. So they give the author an opportunity not only to write the abstract, but for the author to even further condense it to what the author thinks is the most important for that. And then at the very end, appendices of materials and methods, and also much extra data that if you want to look at, you have the opportunity to do it. That's because the internet or the digital age allows you to change that and have that extra information without getting in the road of the reader getting to what he wants to read quickly.
Another question or comment?
Hello. Probably I have a question from here because last week from the submitted abstract from the students, we found most of the problems is related to the result section. As mentioned by Professor Peters, this is actually occupied the most percentage of their paper. We found of the students just write a sentence, say, oh, from the figure, from the table, we find the parameter A is decreasing and parameter B is whatever, and that's it. So I think this is a little bit too short and taking some important parts. So would you please talk about more about how to write a good result section?
Okay. Well, thank you, President. In the results section, there is the figures and tables that you use. So you need to be, as I said before, very careful about what data or results you choose to put into that abstract, and make sure that those speak to the topic or focus of what the paper is talking about. Also, those tables and figures, they can present a lot of data in a very small area. So it's important when you start to write your resultant sections, if you want or need to present a lot of data, try and have that in the figure or the table, and not repeat it in the words. When you're talking about a figure or the table, try and point out what you think is the most important or most significant aspect of that data. Not just that the table found that we, at week 6, we found X. At week 7, we found Y. That is just still data, but it doesn't tell them if you were trying to explain it to them, that significant rise between week 6 and 7 we think is due to this, and this may have consequences for that. So you're using the tables and figures to provide the data, you're using your text to give your understanding of what that data means, and providing some initial interpretation of what that data means. So you're going from just reporting in a long worded sentence what the data is, to a perspective where you're trying to help the reader understand or identify in that table or in that figure what is the most important part and why you think that is the most important part, or provide the background that you can then in the discussion use that to explain why this was important. Professor Yen, is that okay?
Thank you. Yeah, thank you for the explanation. Probably this also I found from students' thesis as well. They don't know how to write the result in proper way. So I think this will help a lot of students. Yeah. Any more questions?
Okay, thank you very much.